Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm so grateful that you're here. This is the third free online event for Ecofluency's Baobab fundraising campaign. My name is Saskia, and I'm the founder of Ecofluency. To give you a bit of context, my work with Ecofluency is teaching and consulting in nature communication, which is the capacity that all humans have to not only connect, but to communicate, to dialogue with more than human nature using a wider range of senses and awareness. I share more about nature communication in the first call that happened in January, and the recording for that is on the campaign website, where Kirsten Ewens, the founder of All Rise, was a guest speaker. So you can find out more about nature communication there and also generally on the website on ecofluency.org. But I say this because this campaign has been created in response to a request from the Baobab trees. We can co-create with the more than human parts of nature by bringing in the voice of nature as a stakeholder in decision making. This is not something that is new. This is something that Indigenous people have been doing for millennia, not just to grow food, but to create entire food landscapes in harmony with all of nature, to support all of life forms and to revitalize the resources that nourish the entire ecosystem. So, in November last year, I tuned in with the land and the trees who are currently threatened by a mining mega development in northern Limpopo in South Africa, within the UNESCO protected Vembe Biosphere Reserve. Oh, sorry if my video's pausing, I look surprised. Um, the purpose for me tuning in November last year was to ask if and what I could appropriately do to support nature there. And what I got from the baobab trees is very strong and clear. I was asked to bring my own voice to this issue and to raise funding for All Rise. Now, some of you already know about All Rise, but I'm going to share just a few lines about that, a few sentences. All Rise is a non-profit law clinic in South Africa whose focus is on environmental and climate justice, and they are currently the only legal voice defending the lives of these trees that I'm aware of. One of the ways that they're doing this is by investigating the permits that have been applied for to rip out the protected trees and to destroy entire indigenous forests. Without the permits, these mega developments shouldn't really be allowed to go forward legally. So it's a crucial part of stopping this project from causing so much unnecessary destruction. And the aim of the Baobab campaign is to help protect the lives and the land of tens of thousands of ancient and iconic baobab trees and the hundreds of thousands of other trees, like more than 1 million actually, if we're counting, and to present alternatives to this development that would be far more aligned with the well-being and the wealth of the people in Limpopo, for the rest of South Africa, and all of nature on this beloved earth of ours. But there's another aim to this campaign, and that is to help bring more people to connect deeply and to communicate with these trees and with the rest of nature in what Andrew Harvey calls sacred activism, which is, and I quote, a transforming force of compassion in action that is born of a fusion of deep spiritual knowledge, courage, love, and passion with wise radical action in the world. The large-scale practice of sacred activism can become an essential force for preserving and healing the planet and its inhabitants. I speak more about sacred activism in the first call in January, which includes a guided journey to meet the baobab trees. And as I mentioned, we had the founder of All Rise, Kirsten Ewens, as guest speaker in that call. And we're in the second call that happened in February. I had Mpateleni Makolule, who is the founder of Zomola Mupo and an incredible environmental activist, indigenous elder, who is doing everything she can to protect her homeland in northern Limpopo. And today, I'm really honored to have Lauren on the call with us. Lauren is the founder of Living Limpopo, which is a non-profit organization campaigning to stop the wild heart of Limpopo from being sacrificed for coal and for dirty industry. Living Limpopo is opposing the development of the ecocidal industrial mega development project known as the Musina-Makhado Special Economic Zone, as well as the damming of the Limpopo River and the exploitation of the Greater Soutpansberg Coalfield in the Limpopo River Valley. Lauren serves on the board of the Vembe Biosphere Reserve, where she leads the Great Vembe Conservation Area project, an ambitious protected areas expansion and restoration program that will protect the region's deep biodiversity reservoir. Lauren's also a writer, more recently on environmental issues, but she's published several critically acclaimed novels. So, welcome, Lauren. I'm curious, as the founder of Living Limpopo, what is your connection to the landscape? And what moved you to start the campaign? I mean, it's grown into quite a big movement, but how did it all begin?
Thank you, Saskia, and good evening, everyone. Thank you, Saskia, again for the opportunity, and thank you to everyone for giving up your time. I appreciate not just the opportunity to raise awareness of our cause, but for once in our lives to be supporting All Rise instead of the other way around. They've been there with defending us since the beginning, and it's a privilege to be able to support a fundraiser of theirs from instead of being they never send us a bill for their legal fees. Let's just put it like that. So anyway, thank you again, everyone. Saskia, that's a hard question to start off with. I don't know. I guess it's hard to put into words your connection to a place, isn't it? It's I guess ultimately it's about your memories being bound up with that place. And in my case, it's my family's farm that is now part of the herd reserve down there in the Limpopo River Valley. But it's not just my memories of myself when I was young, once upon a time, long time ago, but my memories of my own children when they were young, watching my parents grow old up there. Eventually the place, the land, it becomes a part of you, it becomes a part of your soul. Um, and I guess Living Limpopo, it was born to save that which is sacred, and not just to me. We first heard about the industrial scale threat that is the Musina-Makhado Special Economic Zone back in 2019 now. It was very old, the old-fashioned way. My husband read about it in the newspaper, and I've said this before, and sounds a bit cliche even now, but it's still true. I will never forget that day. The reading that I can. It's one of those flashbulb memories that you have in your life where I can still picture myself sitting there reading this article, this revelation of the plans. That first of all uh, that the government has held some kind of garage sale for Limpopo's resources back in 2013 already, without any of our knowledge or consent, and that they were now planning on building this Goliath of a heavy industrial zone, a latter-day ISCOR, right here in the Vembi, in the wild, beating heart of Limpopo. That they were going to dam the Limpopo River, for God's sake, to supply this dirty, thirsty mega industrial plant and the 12 new open cast coal mines that were going to be built to feed the great blast furnaces that will be rising up on the edge of the coal pits where the smelter will be built. And it sort of had this surreal quality to it, but I guess it was the shock that galvanized us into action. It was one of those moments of on the revelation on the road to Damascus where you just know that I must act here. If not I, who will? But anyway, I'm emphasizing the personal pronoun here when in fact it was we. It was my sisters and I who at that time then we launched a campaign to try to raise public awareness about the environmental impact assessment that had then just been published for public comment. Um, and it was called the No to Says campaign by my very much more forthright, straight talker of a younger sister. And No to Says, that campaign actually generated a huge response. Thousands of people answered the call and submitted their objections to this development through our portal that we'd set up. And that was where the movement that is today Living Limpopo began. And Saskia, I believe that it is because all of us, who live in our age, in these times, are witness to nature's death by 1,000 cuts. And all of us feel the sorrow of that and seize every small chance there is to raise our voices in protest against this. And, it has been living this reality, as a frontline activist, to sound very pretentious, that and just seeing how people respond, ultimately that's what gives me hope. um it's what it's what inspires me, it's what inspires all of us at Living Limpopo, and it's why we don't give up, and it's why we're sitting here tonight talking to you all.
To me, it sounds very much, Lauren, like you're not just defending nature, you're nature defending itself. So when you talk about this movement strongly in the first person, that's what comes to mind. We forget that we are the landscape itself, we are the soil and the trees itself. We're made of the same stuff, we're just in different forms. But those who aren't familiar in the audience with this landscape, would you mind, Lauren, sharing a bit more about the Vembe landscape, as well as the current threat to it and the campaign that Living Limpopo has been created to protect it, please?
All right, as you say, let's start with where is Vembe. For those in the audience who, let me put on my glasses, try to read my notes here. For those in the audience who might not want to admit that they don't know, whenever I'm down in Cape Town, I get this impression that, half the crowd thinks that Limpopo might be somewhere in, Malawi. So, okay. Basically, the Vembe district and of Limpopo province, and the Vembe Biosphere Reserve is located in the very far north. It's the northernmost district of Limpopo province, right up to the Limpopo River and the boundary, the international border with Zimbabwe. Um, and it is a vast landscape, really. It's the Vembe Biosphere Reserve is fully 30,700 square kilometers, so that's 3.7 million hectares, and it stretches from the Soutpansberg mountain range in the south, right through to the Limpopo River in the north, and it's bounded on the northwest by the Mapungubwe National Park and Transfrontier Conservation Area, and the Kruger National Park and the Pafuri Triangle there in the northeast, and that great Limpopo Transfrontier Conservation Area there. And it is also, as I think you've alluded to already, Saskia, it's a region of extraordinary natural beauty and diversity. Just skip past the slide on the VBR. I think this headline, this slide header needs to be scratched out. I think terms like bone dry technical terms like the biodiversity significance, doesn't even begin to capture the Vembe. It's the lush ravines on the slopes of the Soutpansberg Mountains. It's that roll down into this rugged savanna landscape there in the bushveld along the Limpopo River Valley, right through to the Makhado wetlands. The Lavuvu River plunges through the Lana Gorge and then spills out across this wetland there in the Makhado contractual park in the Pafuri Triangle until it sort of merges with this fever tree like fringed forest on the banks of the Limpopo River. In fact, I actually can't stand it. Let's just go back to my cover slide because you might have missed it, folks. And let us all just gasp in awe at the scene of the Lana Gorge with the Luvuvu flowing through it there. But it's also culturally rich, as you said. It's a real it's the ancient peoples who've inhabited this landscape that kind of echo all around you. You'll they're there in the rock art there in the Makhabeng plateau that you're looking up there in the top left there of my slide. It's in those stone ruins from the Mapungubwe kingdom from the 12th century. It's the sacred waters of Lake Fundudzi and the crowded Tatevondo forest guarded by, ancient spirits and the rituals of the Venda, whose as cultural practices and spiritual practices are so closely bound with Lamupo, Chivenda word meaning, all of nature and creation. It's essentially, this is one of the last places in South Africa where the spirit of the ancestors and an older, wilder Africa still breathe as one. So I think rhapsodized enough about the Vimbi. But it is an extraordinary landscape of great biodiversity and cultural value for us all. And the fact that it is tragically, as you're all very aware then, facing a profound threat today is obviously what I really wanted to focus on. The plans to strip mine basically vast tracts of what is still pristine bushveld to supply an apartheid era, sort of a Soviet era industrial mega project that's been built in the Limpopo River Valley is obviously going to transform this living landscape into another one of South Africa's sacrifice zones. A landscape that the term sacrifice zone, has come to connote landscapes devastated by coal extraction and heavy industry. And it's the prospect of 10 new open cast, open pit coal mines, steel, power, petrochemical plants, a mega dam on the Limpopo River that looms over all of us, that over our fragile ecosystems, over our communities who are mostly poor and vulnerable. At the center of the government's ambitious, let's give it to them, folks. These plans are audacious, if nothing else. But at the center of government's ambitious plans to sort of industrialize and urbanize the Vembi stands the Musina-Makhado Special Economic Zone. It's a state-backed, Chinese-controlled steel manufacturing juggernaut, essentially. And it is that is already driving the exploitation of the surrounding coalfield, the Greater Soutpansberg Coalfield. So the what, the where, the why, I will try to summarize as briefly as I can. But basically, the Greater Soutpansberg Coalfield is largely unexploited, and the 10 billion tons of hard coking and thermal coal that lie buried beneath the Baobabs in a sort of 200-kilometer stretch between Pafuri and the Tuli block in the Limpopo River Valley are largely unexploited, mostly because they've proven stubbornly unprofitable to mine so far. And the MMSEZ, the Musina-Makhado Special Economic Zone, that we love to turn everything into an acronym, but the MMSEZ is, and it's at the crux of it, the smelter project is meant to, and it's openly intended to support the expansion of coal mining in the region by one, creating a purpose-built, local off-taker, a local buyer for the coal, and secondly, by funding through the SEZ policy and the SEZ Act, the Special Economic Zones Policy and Act, but it will fund the investment in the dedicated infrastructure, power, water, transport infrastructure that will enable the development of that coal field, that will enable the export of the raw coal along with the zone's metallurgical output, the steel output. The SEZ policy in South Africa, just to deviate for a minute, is essentially a program where you heavily subsidize the development of these industrial zones and dangle sweeties paid for from the public purse in order to attract foreign direct investment in manufacturing, because we fetishize foreign direct investment in manufacturing, capital M. Ultimately, the whole economic case for doubling South Africa's crude primary steel manufacturing capacity is wretchedly weak. As most of you will be aware, much of ArcelorMittal's fleet is currently sitting in mothballs. It's been accompanied by hemorrhaging of jobs. There's been tremendous job shedding in the domestic steel production sector in South Africa. So the rationale behind borrowing from China to invest in doubling our steel output is weak, to say the least. And at the same time, even if there were this very strong market case for the steel, which there is not, the feasibility of developing what is power intensive, very water intensive. These are power hungry and thirsty industry that you're developing here is dubious. This whole scheme is dependent, I should flip to the next slide. This whole scheme is dependent on generating 3,500 megawatts of power to make the metal that analysts like to dub congealed energy. It also relies on plundering the Limpopo River and its water resources to supply the industrial zone and the coal mines. The proposed Musina Dam complex, it's called, is sort of they'll call it a weir and off-channel storage dam complex that is supposed to capture up to 60% of the Limpopo River's annual flow. And to supply the zone's water requirements. All of this at an eye-watering cost to the public coffers, and of course, the resilience of the entire Limpopo River Valley basin system. So I think that's enough of the threat dwelling on the description of the Musina-Makhado Special Economic Zone and what will accompany it. But I just want to end on saying the obvious and I know I'm preaching to the converted here. But the impact, obviously, of this development is going to reverberate far beyond the 60 square kilometer Musina-Makhado Special Economic Zone. We're talking about wall to wall. It's near contiguous, back to back coal mining and industrial developments across 130,000 square kilometers area, all of it natural, much of it critical biodiversity areas, and that excludes, folks, it excludes the land-hungry solar plants that are being developed to greenwash the power supply plants here, but that will obviously irreversibly transform the landscape and the natural character of it. Air, water, soil pollution are going to cause severe environmental degradation across a far, far greater impact area than the 136,000 hectare footprint of this development, and that is going to have very serious negative spillovers for other sectors of the economy. And it's poor rural communities that will ultimately pay the true price of coal and steel, not least in their health, food and water security, livelihoods, as those ecosystems on which those communities heavily rely essentially collapse. For those of you that are, um, you know, uh, you know, more alive to this, the climate-related impacts are frightening. So, according to the EIA report, so in other words, on their own version, the zone will emit a staggering billion tons of carbon over its 30-year lifetime. It's going to consume something like 14% of South Africa's annual carbon budget, which equates to our commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It jeopardizes South Africa's ability to meet those commitments. And again, this is on its own version and in the assessment that the EIA assessment that was done for climate, with very serious negative economic consequences alone from that. So the economic penalties, again, is not something I want to dwell on. I think you and I all understand the devastation that will be wrought by this. The architects of the Musina-Makhado Special Economic Zone are promising deliverance for the benighted, impoverished Vembe. And they proclaim themselves as these visionaries who are going to give rise to the coming century's Witwatersrand, built not on gold this time, but on coal and steel. When in reality, the economic fault lines upon which this whole scheme is dependent run very deep. It's a terrible price will be paid for any jobs it spawns, and those jobs will come at the expense of the jobs in tourism, in farming, and in the emerging biodiversity economy in this rich biodiversity hotspot, as well as in the domestic steel industry, which this threatens to cannibalize.
So,
So
can I just interject for a moment and say, and as if this doesn't feel like it touches a nerve yet, let's make it personal. And estimates, conservative estimates, put the price on South African taxpayers at something like 400 billion, not million, not hundreds of million, billion. 400 billion rand that's going to cost the South African taxpayer to profit these neo-colonial industries.
that's right. And it's the opportunity cost of all of that too. Every cent, every rand, and every minute of our very limited institutional capacity that is now dedicated to digging up and shoveling coal into the blast furnaces on the edge of the newly excavated coal pits, is another rand and another minute of institutional capacity squandered on for what could have had real socioeconomic impact for South Africans. But I think the point that we need to get to now is that these aren't just plans, Saskia. This is already in the early stages of development. And in December 2024, MC Mining, which is controlled by Chinese coal producer Kinetic Development, Kinetic Resources, which is also an anchor investor in the CES. They are developing the ferrochrome smelter in the MMSEZ, illegally broke ground on their flagship, as they call it, Makhado Colliery, which is located right adjacent to the smelter site. The industrial zones, there are multiple industrial zones, but the smelter site is adjacent to what is now the Makhado Colliery. And this is despite the fact that there is an appeal decision pending on environmental authorization for the colliery. So I think, Saskia, I've given you the link to the folder to show everyone what is actually happening on the ground. So it really the impact. So these are all aerial photographs. If you try to gain access to the site, you will find that it's guarded like Alcatraz. So we are reduced always to aerial footage and of images. But I'll just let you flip through this slowly for a minute. If I need to interject, I'll explain what you're looking at.
So this is really just how the beginning looks for what will end up looking devastating, like the images that you had in your presentation. This is how it begins.
As I as I'd mentioned to you, this is the first of a dozen, literally 12 new open cast coal mines that will be developed to feed the beast. So, however devastating it is to look at the scale of destruction as this is only in the construction phase. If you maybe want to go back for a second, Saskia, and play that video, it's very short, little clip there. Let's actually let's skip to the next one. I don't think the visuals are too clear.
Is that the one or a previous one?
Next one. Our pilot swoops in in the
What?
next shot. No, go to the next one.
Oh, why can't I do that? I'm on internet. There we go.
Okay, no, I just go back again. Okay, we'll give up after this if it won't cooperate. But
That's
just go
because
back.
I can't press the buttons because the Zoom thing was over it.
Okay.
That's the one.
Um, no, don't worry. Let's go back to the photographs. I mean, I think to end up on that note, there you can see the Soutpansberg Mountains in the background. As it's been built in the northern foothills there. Site of that forlorn Baobab standing there now in this wasteland that MC Mining have created. This is a Chinese company that have entered South Africa, violating South Africa's environmental standards, our environmental protection legislation, and the government, you know, stands idle while this proceeds.
So what's interesting is that the baobabs are some of the protected trees that haven't been issued permits for removal.
That's
So
right.
in what you've described as a mockery of conservation efforts, they've been like, okay, we won't remove the protected trees, we'll just remove everyone else. And now these two trees, this older one and this bebe here, are left. I mean, what comes to mind is imagine everything around you gets bombed, gets scraped. Imagine you're in a war zone and just you are left. I mean, this is winter now, so these trees don't have leaves on them, but they will die eventually because trees exist in forests, they live in community. This is just like an icon. It's a big FU basically to everyone who's trying to look after these trees and the entire forest. These are sacred landscapes to the Venda. To many people, that won't mean a damn thing. But these are medicine. These are medicine deeply on a physical, on a spiritual, on a cultural level. And what's left behind here, this is just sad. You may as well you may as well have not left them for the good that it does.
I know. I feel like Saskia, I know this sounds a little melodramatic, but that baobab, I mean, to have lived for the thousands upon thousands of years, the countless generations that that it has stood witness to, that its last stand is to bear witness to this devastation, is its last act. That I hope you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
That I hope that it speaks for what is happening here. I mean, it will, yes, it will die, and it will die after having survived thousands of years, and it will die to get to the shallow coal deposits buried beneath its roots. We're still only looking at the end of the day at vegetation clearance, and they're stripping away the topsoil there. So this is although the environmental damage here is already severe and irreversible, there is no doubt, and this is already disrupting those ecosystems around there. These are very fragile ecosystems in our arid savanna biome, and all of that. But it is still, as I say, this is the beginning. They haven't they haven't reached their coal deposits yet, and this is the first of the mines that will supply this industrial zone. I think everybody here has been to Funnervale Park. You know of what we speak when we talk about South Africa's sacrifice zones. What I still want to get across to everyone, though, is that Limpopo and Vembi can yet be spared the Mpumalanga Highveld's fate. While we're dwelling on this horrifying image, it is not too late. We can still pivot away from this, uh, you know, really regressive economic development model for this region and into something far more progressive and far better suited to our natural assets, and our limitations, for heavy industry. So yeah, let's yeah, I think that's enough of the well, we always get accused of environmentalists of being doom mongers, and then here we are, doom mongering versus we can.
But
I
it's the
think
truth. Lauren, that's the thing, is that the attack on environmentalists and the accusation of them being doom mongers is because that they're exposing the truth. So thank you for bringing light to this. Thank you for being the one brave enough, together with a few others who are willing to make a change. But my question then is, now what? What is an alternative to what we've seen?
there is, as you rightly say, there's still hope. So first of all, we have the Living Limpopo as an advocacy group for a living landscape in Limpopo, works alongside a very broad coalition of civil society, conservation, social, environmental justice organizations. We do not stand alone. And in fact, I see several people on the call tonight that really have supported the cause. Following the carte blanche expose in February, we'd launched a petition to try to urge the Minister of Environment, Dion George, to uphold the appeal against environmental authorization for Makhado Colliery that has in fact expired. And it was with BirdLife South Africa, with WESA, it was with a whole cohort of other very powerful voices in environmental justice who've joined us. And I see Patrick and them on the call tonight and appreciate it as well. But the main, so, and we've got literally thousands of also ordinary people who've joined the movement, and so we are having an impact. I mean, our strategy that we follow, to say, together with our alliance partners who are very broad based. We represent a wide constituencies now. We pursue strategic litigation to obstruct this very grossly unsound development model. We engage in media campaigns to raise public awareness. We do extensive research and education, and we are trying to secure funding for biodiversity stewardship, and more about that in a minute. But this tonight is about the action number one, strategic litigation, and using the courts to weigh in on whether we should be proceeding down this road any further. So there's that. But as you rightly say, I wanted to end on something a little bit beyond the legal battle stuff. And this is a war zone, and you can end up also starkly drawing lines with the enemies, and it's also quite destructive. I want to get into something more constructive as well. So one of the campaign's biggest objectives is promoting an alternative economic development framework. And we promote it. An alternative economic development framework is what I mean by that is a nature-based and nature-positive economic development model, and an alternative to coal and coal resource extraction and combustion in apartheid era industrial zones. Um, so it's under the brand of the Great Vembe Conservation Area. It's a catalytic project that we are promoting again together with in partnership with the Vembe Biosphere Reserve, the TNC, the Nature Conservancy, and many other alliance partners. It's a truly visionary landscape scale land management program for the Vembe. It's focused on protected areas expansion and restoration programs in the buffer zones around it. Um, and it aims ultimately to connect the Mapungubwe National Park and the Drake and the Transfrontier Conservation Area with the Kruger National Park and the Pufuri and the Makoleka wetlands and the whole Great Limpopo Transfrontier Conservation Area through an east-west corridor along the Limpopo River, and then a southern arc through the Soutpansberg Mountains, which is an extraordinarily rich area of endemism and biodiversity significance. So while it is a conservation plan, it's far more than that. Saskia, it is ultimately, this is our, we also megalomaniacs with our mega project ambitions. This is, I'll see your mega project and I'll raise you with our landscape scale vision for it that is actually also the undergirding of a blueprint for a new kind of economic development plan, a just transition to a nature positive economy where the value of living systems underpins what will be really sustainable and inclusive growth. So while we hang on the reopening of those wildlife migration corridors along the Limpopo River Valley and the Soutpansberg Mountains, um, it's going to stimulate the whole the biodiversity economy. These are complementary sectors, from tourism to a whole lot of I'm going to say it nervously, but the carbon yield that we can develop from the investment in the protection of the natural terrestrial carbon sink, and in its restoration to optimal levels. In other words, where conservation programs seem to be, these are not just activities that are come at a cost, they are revenue generating activities. It's about leaning into these seismic shifts that are starting to happen in our economic paradigm. Up until now, in our rapacious capitalist system and throughout its destructive history, all of nature is viewed as nothing but a resource to convert to commodities. And what is happening now with the climate crisis that is ultimately just a nature crisis? Finally, this is beginning to change. We are seeing some major shifts with the emergence of carbon tax and carbon pricing and carbon markets. What you're seeing is how to put this? It's like in an economic system where an oil spill in the Arctic only has a positive impact on GDP, where Glencore has a market cap of 60 billion US dollars or something, but the Earth's atmosphere was worth nothing, where trees only have monetary value felled for their timber or for the coal buried beneath their roots, as the case may be. Finally, these newer mechanisms of putting a price on the air we breathe. They are forcing polluters to pay for dumping their pollution into the atmosphere, to utilize Earth's atmosphere's finite capacity for absorbing these greenhouse gases before we seriously destabilize the climate. And it's stopping the free plunder of the commons, and at the same time, it's giving trees rooted in the soil real, hard, realizable economic value as natural infrastructure for the ecosystem services they are providing, starting with carbon regulation, with the carbon cycle. So our hope is that although these are pioneering days for this type of shift these type of economic development models, we are hoping to be at the forefront of this. We want to position the Vembe as one of South Africa's big plays in the biodiversity economy framework that's emerged under the Department of Forestry, Fishery and Environment, and under our climate policy response, where the investment in the protection of our natural terrestrial carbon sinks and in their restoration yields carbon credits that can then fund these programs for the benefit of those rural custodians of this rich biodiversity reservoir and natural carbon sink. But I think I've rambled on enough. This is not an economics lecture. This is still ultimately our fundraiser for All Rise. So, in conclusion, the Great Limpopo Conservation Area is our hope. We want to be solutions focused. We don't want to be at war for eternity. It's about reopening those wildlife migration trails between Mapungubwe and Great Limpopo and the old salt mountains, that is the Soutpansberg, and leaving that coal buried beneath the Baobabs. And it is about finding the new path for an economy where the economy serves the living earth and all of us instead of destroying it. And I just want to say that those of you who are moved by the cause, right now, the priority is still filling the coffers, the war chest at All Rise, so that we can continue to fight the good fight, which we still also need to do. You need to, in order to put the brakes on this, in order to hit pause, so that we can have the space to lobby, to use a dirty word, the dark arts of lobbying, but to advocate for a policy shift in the region to something less destructive, more constructive, that is in fact viable and will have hugely greater socioeconomic impact. So in the meantime, it is urgent that we get those interdicts, that the High Court review case that we've got against environmental authorization for this Musina-Makhado Special Economic Zone, all the rest of it, are well funded, and that All Rise are well supported, so that they can continue to defend us and not just Living Limpopo, but all of us, because the impacts of the Musina-Makhado Special Economic Zone are not just local. They're not even limited to the Limpopo province or even to South Africa, but are global in scale. And it is therefore a cause that all of us stand to benefit from supporting. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lauren. There was a question that came up. I see that Patrick had two questions which you've basically answered, I think, in the course of sharing. There's another question from Jan. Would you find it useful with concerns raised by foreign, in brackets, European governments in the current situation?
Sorry, to repeat the question, would we find it helpful if
I don't know fully if I understand the phrasing of the question either, but I think it's pointing to, would it be helpful if we got foreign governments involved, or at least had their perspectives?
ultimately, as I say, these are I do, as I say, given the fact that this is planetary in scale. Everyone has a right, is entitled to have a voice in whether South Africa, in the year of our Lord 2025, is exploiting a new coalfield and is deliberately developing coal-based industries in order to drive the exploitation of a new coalfield and dump another 33 million tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, for the benefit of a handful of foreign coal profiteers. I think the louder it is this constantly the provincial government in particular likes to attack us on lack of locus standi. Who do we represent here? And my retort, is always that you're accountable to all of nature and to all of us with this development. This is not your prerogative to have made this decision unilaterally that we're going. So yes, I think yes, if there was more international from civil society organizations, the bigger heavyweights internationally from governments, non-government NGOs, more reliant, more reliable, I mean, actually in coming in openly criticizing South Africa's policies, and yeah, the better, because yes, South Africa's economic policies here should be heavily criticized. They are schizophrenic in relation to our biodiversity and climate policies. They are utterly inappropriate and at odds with so many of our commitments globally under international treaties that are binding on South Africa. So yes, please, I hope from this YouTube podcast to the world's ears, yeah.
So that actually speaks to what Nicholas raises of it might be a good idea to raise it at the G20 Leaders Summit in November in Johannesburg.
Oh, Nicholas, how I wish I could find. I mean, we have used every contact, and I consider ourselves so well connected our landscape now, but we have not managed to secure an audience with the right, with the right influences there with the G20. But I agree with you. The G20 Bioeconomy Summit in particular, Bioeconomy Initiative, sorry, in particular is the appropriate vehicle, I think. We should be it was handed over from Brazil, the baton was passed over to us, and we're freaking away the opportunity, in my opinion. And this landscape, this pivot away from the coal resource extraction to rather to its sequestration capacity, to investing in the carbon sequestration capacity that is the GBCA project is surely, I think, that ripe for a G20 bioeconomy initiative. But anyway, yes, I would agree with you, but how, oh how, Rich, Nicholas, how?
If anybody does have contacts that could be supportive, please do reach out to Lauren, because Living Limpopo, All Rise, all of those players who are involved in bringing this to a grinding halt, they could use your help. So please do reach out. I did want to do a short prayer with the Baobabs, but I do wonder if we're going to have time because I do want to respect everybody's um, commitment to just an hour here. So we might have to leave that out for now. No, we can't. No, we can't. We have to. We're going to do a very, very short prayer with the baobab trees if everyone's interested. For those who aren't going to stay for the short prayer with the baobabs, I do want to say thank you so much for being present here. And remember that this is a campaign that is aimed at fundraising for All Rise. So please do make sure to send any donations. Every bit counts to All Rise. You can donate directly to them on their website. The link is also in the Ecofluency campaign. And make sure to use Baobab as your reference so we can track how much this campaign is raising. And I highly recommend watching the other recordings of the talks done in January and February, with Kirsten and with Batileni as the guest speakers. So I think for the last few minutes, I'm going to guide just a very short prayer, blessing, invocation, just words, a greeting to the baobab trees and with them. And the reason I'm going to do this is because part of sacred activism recognizes that humans used to play a role as a keystone species. A keystone species is a crucial species for the biodiversity, for the structure, for the survival and the thriving of an ecosystem. We've done that throughout the millennia, since humans became humans as recognizable as today. Um, we have listened to the landscape, and through ritual and communication and communion with the landscape, we've co-created solutions to problems that we've found, and we've created food landscapes. This is something that the Venda do in their landscape management. Indigenous practices the world over on every continent have ensured that modern day 5% of our population are indigenous people, and yet they manage 80% of the biodiversity worldwide. But if we reclaim our capacity to communicate with the more than human, because every single human being can do this, every single one of us can do this because we are nature. when we reclaim that skill and we develop that and we use that to inform our everyday practical decision making, it means that we can co-create solutions not just to what we find ourselves here with the mining developments, but all of our daily decisions to bring about change that occurs in inner landscapes as well as outer landscapes, so that all of life can thrive on this beloved earth of ours. That is possible. So we're going to start by recognizing that, yes, what All Rise are doing is to legally counteract what we're seeing. Okay? But this is not to create an us and them narrative. This is not we are the good guys and they are the bad guys who are doing the mining. This is recognizing that as a species, we are part of it. And the greed, the despair, the hunger, the exhaustion, the depression, the anxiety, the lack that we find probably prominently driving the decisions of the people who are mining and have created this entire fiasco to begin with. Those same things exist in us. So what I ask and what nature asks of us is that we recognize that, have compassion for those. It doesn't justify their actions, but that we hold compassion in our hearts for those people. And we recognize that as we heal the species. And our changes can be felt. We can never measure the impact that such a prayer, such a ritual, such a small, tiny offering that we have to the world, we can never measure the impact that it has. We can only trust that when we are asked by nature to do something, like I was asked by the Baobab trees to create this fundraising campaign, that we do it and we see what happens. We treat it seriously, but we hold it lightly. And we make sure that ultimately that universal love that reigns supreme, that governs all of life ultimately, that becomes the guiding force behind the decisions for even those humans that are making the decisions now, for or against mining. We don't know what the impact will be, but we do it anyway. So, I know that we're at 7 o'clock local time, but I invite you, if you're willing to stay, for us to close this call with a very short prayer. And to do that, I invite you to sit as comfortable as it feels for you, as you can. If you're lying down, that's fine. If you're standing, that's fine. Let your spine be like a supple young tree, flexible and stable. Feel the vertebrae stacked in your spine. Let your shoulders gently roll backwards and downwards. And your belly be soft. Let your breath become slower and longer, deeper even. Bringing our awareness to our breath allows us to activate our bodies as a listening instrument. Notice what's happening for yourself right now. Being curious, letting go of any judgment, just noticing. If it feels available to you, hold the feeling of compassion in your heart area. Hold the feeling of gratitude in your heart area. Gratitude can be accessed through a memory of gratitude that you have for anything, anyone in your life. Deep, true gratitude, the kind that makes your entire heart want to burst open. For me, it's always the sun. When I think of the sun, everything about me is filled with warmth. And now, if it feels okay to do so for you, allow that feeling to expand throughout your whole body, throughout all parts of yourself. Gratitude and compassion, let that filter into all of your cells, down and through all your tissues, into every nucleus of every cell, into all the strands of the DNA. Let it filter into the space around you, filling up all the layers of the space around you that make up the more than physical. Let that glow of gratitude and compassion be felt or be seen within your inner vision like a light. Trees perceive us like glowworms. I've asked trees about this before. So let yourself glow. Let yourself glow like a glowworm. And we're going to let that light expand. And this is not an imaginary light. This is a real light that our DNA produces, called biophotons, that can be increased through practices like this. So let that light expand. Let it expand beyond what you perceive as the boundary of yourself and your field around you. Let it grow to fill maybe the entire room that you are in. Let it grow so that it filters down through the earth, touches the roots of the grass and the trees in the area that you live in. If you want, you can play with the idea that this activates the light that exists in all of the life around you. That the biophotons that their DNA emits, that also grows. Let it expand like tendrils out the top of your head, out through your chest. Expand as far as you can imagine. And let it touch the people making the decisions for this mining development. Doesn't matter if you don't know what they look like, who they are. Just let the light of your gratitude and compassion touch them. Just being present. Through this light that we are emitting, sharing, glowing, I ask, we ask, dare I say, that those who are making the decisions remember that they are the landscape itself, that what they do to the land, here and everywhere else, they do to themselves. Let them remember that their decisions can change, and that they can find belonging back within the greater web of life, that they can find belonging with our earth, and that we can all find belonging. And let that become the basis for our behavior. May all the decisions that we make always be aligned with greater love and harmony, abundance, joy, peace for all of life on this truly beloved earth of ours, including herself, and beyond throughout all time and dimensions. May it be so. And so it is. If or when you feel ready, you're welcome to open your eyes. Notice how you feel right now in yourself. We're quite a bit over time, but I'm going to stay on, and I'll keep the recording going, but I can stop it if anybody would like to share about their experience or have any questions anymore about this little experiential exercise or anything else regarding the campaign. I'll stay on for a while, and I'm so grateful for your presence here. And thank you so much to Lauren for sharing today, for being present. I really appreciate all of the work that you do.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone here tonight, and thank you again, Saskia. Our gratitude is near boundless. Really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks again, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.